Friends, Dr. Krishnan is one of the most outstanding management professional this country has. Dr. Krishnan is the director of IIM Bangalore at present. Before that, he was director of IIM Indore. He has been chair professor of entrepreneurship at IIM Bangalore before. He has been visiting fellow at ISB Hyderabad, fellow professor at IIM Ahmedabad. He graduated from IIT Kanpur and did his MS from Stanford University, California, the biggest hub for entrepreneurship development in the world. He is considered to be a global expert on innovation and strategy. His book titled Jugaad to Innovation is one of the bestseller and is a guide to enhanced innovation output. He served on various committees of Government of India, NASSCOM and CII. We had enriching experience of working with him when he served as chairman of IMA National Management Conclaves, as chairman several times. So welcome to you, Dr. Krishnan, and it's our privilege to have you here. Over to you, sir.
So today I thought I should talk a little bit about innovation in the digital era, because many of our friends must be looking for opportunities in the digital space. As you all know, digital has transformed most of the industries, and I doubt there are any of you who are completely free of the influence of digital. So let us look a little bit at what it takes to lead innovation in this digital era. So as Rakesh just mentioned, I have written a couple of books. One of the books I had written is called 8 Steps to Innovation, which we had written about 7-8 years back. And in that, we had a very simple framework. We said that companies should try to build a systematic innovation capability. What do we mean by this? We mean that doing innovation should become a part of the DNA of the company. Just like the previous speaker was talking about generating hundreds, if not thousands of ideas, rather than making that a chance process, it should be a regular process, a systematic or a structured process in the organization. And not just generating the ideas, but also taking the ideas which are promising and working on them and then making use of them in your business. So in that book, we had identified 3 major challenges that organizations face. The first one is building a pipeline, which is essentially generating sufficient number of new ideas so that you can consistently come up with new business models, new products, services, etc. The second challenge we had tried to address was, how do you ensure that those ideas are taken forward? Many times you would have noticed you come up with a lot of ideas, but many of them just remain as they are. They are not proceeded upon. You don't actually test them out. You don't take them to the market, etc. So how do you cover that gap? And the third challenge we saw is, how do you make sure, or how do you improve the probability that the conversion of the ideas into successful products and business outcome improves? In other words, how do you increase the batting average? So these are the 3 challenges we try to address in that book. And we identified 8 important steps to address those challenges. The first step was to lay the foundation for innovation, identify your innovation priorities, put in place an idea management system, have more participation of your people in the organization in the innovation process. The second step was to create what we call a challenge book, identify some of the key problems or challenges which would benefit from innovation in your organization. And third one was building participation, that is getting more people in the organization involved in innovation activity. The second challenge we looked at was improving the idea velocity, or improving the progress with the ideas. For that, we identified 3 steps. We said you need to have a system where you experiment at low cost at high speed. Basically, you need to test the ideas. Not every idea will necessarily result in a good business outcome. So you need to identify which are the ideas which have higher potential, and you need to test them in a systematic way. Once you have identified the ideas which have potential, you should be able to take them from prototype to incubation. So for that, you need to, sometimes if you're a large organization, you need some champions, people who can help the organization take those high potential ideas to the next stage. And last but not the least, we realize that you need to iterate on the business model. These days, converting the idea into money is not a straightforward process. You all know that Google, for example, has a wonderful search engine, but it has a very sophisticated advertising engine, which allows the search engine to be monetized. So you need to figure out what is the best way of monetizing your business idea. And finally, to enhance the batting average, we identified some methods like using what is called an innovation sandbox, building platforms, using concepts of open innovation, and of course, doing good risk management. So today, my idea is not to go into these in detail. It was just to give you some flavor of this. But instead, I want to look at the whole question of innovation in the digital context. So in the digital context, we have been doing some research and we identified that there are 8 important dimensions which make innovation in the digital era different from how it was earlier. The first one is that the scope for product, process, and business model innovation is increasing exponentially. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. The second important difference is that data has become critical. And in many ways, data is an important element for identifying and understanding customer needs. Therefore, it has almost become a substitute for immersing yourself in customers and customer experiences. Third point is that experimentation, which was important earlier as well, is become easier in the digital era, but it has also become more essential. Earlier, a lot of people used to do things by hunch, intuition. In digital era, that doesn't make sense because you can do low-cost experiments easily and test out your ideas, and therefore you can manage your risk better. The fourth point is open innovation has become also more important, and it has become part of the strategic design. I'll explain in a couple of minutes why that is so. The fifth point is that it's not only about experimentation with a particular idea. Many companies are doing strategic experimentation, particularly through collaboration. You have the most unlikely partners collaborating with each other. So you will have an automotive company, an electronics company, a computer company, and many other types, consumer products company, all collaborating together. And this has become easier thanks to the digital platforms. Getting value out of innovation has become more challenging. That's an important issue to address in the digital era. Earlier, there were some standard methods of getting value out of innovation. Now it's become a little more complex. I'll explain. The shift from your basic domain to new methods like AI and machine learning has become quite important, but it's also risky. And finally, the role of the leader has changed. The leader is now no longer just a decision maker. The leader has become the chief experimenter. I would underline this because for many of you who are running your own business, this is a very important dimension of how innovation is changing in the digital era. So we all know that there are 4 basic types of innovation: product, process, customer experience, business model. But the interesting thing is in the digital world, the scope of innovation has become much broader. Initially with digital, we thought the major impact is only on those products which could be digitized. That's why the first industries which were disrupted were music, books, movies, etc. But now, thanks to sensors and Internet of Things, almost anything is becoming digital. So we can say machines and devices are becoming quasi-digital. What is also interesting is that even services have got impacted. Many of you would know a simple thing. Earlier, everybody used to have the same premium for your motor car insurance. And motor car insurance premium used to be based on some very simple models. Today, the insurance company can actually, if they want, fix a specific premium for you based on your behavior by just putting a sensor in your car and observing your behavior. Based on that, they can know whether you're a risky driver or whether you are a more defensive driver, and they can fix the premium accordingly. In fact, in countries like the US, they're already doing this. When you add artificial intelligence and machine learning, things become even more promising, also more complex. You start having embedded intelligence, self-learning. You can customize things better. And of course, AI and ML have also led to changes in processes. Many of you would know about robotic process automation. So earlier we used to think that if you have large scale, you can have lower costs. Now sometimes those scale and cost trade-offs can be removed thanks to these techniques. Let's take a very simple example of how some of these technologies have changed what you can do. There is a very promising startup or a young company in Bangalore called Niramai. One of the big challenges which healthcare providers face is early detection of breast cancer. If you detect it early, you can treat it successfully, but late detection endangers the patient due to societal reasons and also challenges with X-ray and radiation and so on. Many times breast cancer is not detected early in India. But today, companies like Niramai are using safer, non-intrusive methods, which are also reasonably accurate thanks to machine learning. For example, they are using a thermal image processing algorithm for reliable, accurate screening of breast cancer. And machine learning enables this algorithm to be much more accurate. So they're able to get 97 to 98% accuracy. So this is low cost, accurate, it's automatic, and it solves many of the problems which I mentioned earlier. As you know, we are also living in an experience economy. So there are a lot of opportunities for improving the experience. And you know that bots, artificial and virtual reality, augmented reality also add to this. There are new business model innovations, though they also have huge risks. We know that on the one hand, Uber has enhanced the scope of its business in a big way, but at the same time, it also makes pretty large losses because of the inherent challenges in its business model. And we also know that more and more companies are looking at not only just doing automation, but moving from automation to augmentation. That is using AI and other methods to improve efficiency, but then using human skills to complement that, to bring in intelligence, to bring in new ideas, develop new products, and so on. So that is the scope of digital innovation or innovation in the digital era, even in traditional businesses. And that's why it has become so important to embrace many of these ideas in your day-to-day business. Second important point is that data has become a substitute for customer immersion. Traditionally, we used to always argue that you should spend a lot of time with customers, understand their needs, and work from the market backwards, and then design your product or service accordingly. But just look at what some company like Bajaj Finserv does. Many of you might have invested in Bajaj Finance. Stock has been doing very well in the last few years. And one of the reasons stock has been doing very well is that they have relatively low NPAs, but they also do very well in the loan business. How do they do this? By extensive use of data. They gave out millions of EMI cards, which allow them to observe the behavior of consumers. So that gives them one database. They have a lot of credit card users. That gives a second database. And then they also buy data from third-party data providers like Equifax. They integrate this data with the data which they have themselves generated. And they are able to use all of this data together to figure out whether somebody is a good credit risk or not, and to do a loan approval in a matter of just 30 seconds or maybe a couple of minutes. And they're able to do this reasonably consistently with a fairly low NPA level. So they've managed to make personal finance into a much safer and a high growth business with lower risks thanks to the use of data. This is how data is transforming many of the industries. Let's look now at experimentation. Experimentation has become easier, but it has also become essential. You just think about a company like Google. They generally don't have to convene a customer focus group to discuss the search engine experience. If they want to add a new feature, they don't have to set up a committee to vote on it. They're constantly experimenting. They're trying out new ideas. Some select group of customers is getting access to a new feature. They're comparing that group's experience to a group who did not have that feature. Then they're able to decide whether the new feature is worth adding or not. It's a simple thing, but essentially it's basically putting in place a very systematic testing activity. So there are two types of testing which are becoming very important. One is the convergent one, which I just talked about. You want to know whether you should have feature A or feature B. So you do a very formal experiment to decide which is better. But you can do a lot of open-ended testing also. For example, you can put a prototype in the hands of customers, allow customers to play with it, see what kind of questions they pose. And all of this is quite possible thanks to various forms of digital technologies and platforms. There's this lady, Karen Hansen, who is the CIO of Intuit. which is a very popular finance software company, which gives solutions for people to manage their personal finances. And she said, we can run 50 different ideas through our rapid experimentation process in the same time and resources it used to take them to run 3 ideas through their old process. The fourth important dimension is to use open innovation. So many of the large companies are collaborating actively with startups. And this is something many of you can also do, even if you don't want to go into a startup yourself. You can work with startups who already have lots of ideas, who understand the digital environment well, and who can help you expand or grow your business. So you look at a company like Cisco, they have a very structured program called Launchpad. With that, they interact with about 8-10 startups for 3 or 4 months at a time. They're able to understand new technologies. They're able to absorb some of those technologies into the company, and they also get some possible additions to their sale engine. What companies are also doing is a lot of collaboration and through digital. For example, if you look at a company like Ford, which is basically a car company, they are doing experiments on car sharing, on car swap, on social shuttle buses, parking space location, all of this by collaborating with other companies. They realize that they may not have the expertise in all these areas. Other companies may be more experienced and be better positioned to do that. So they are collaborating with a wide variety of companies across industries. And I think that's the point I would emphasize in order to be able to look at some of the new opportunities in the digital space in a much better way. As I mentioned right in the beginning, one of the big challenges is getting value out of innovation. Traditionally, many companies used intellectual property, particularly for product innovation. So for example, if you looked at a company like Gillette, historically, they would use something like 57 patents to cover one razor. Some of you might have been using this Mach 3 razor of Gillette. It has 57 US patents covering it. That's the way they used to try and protect their products. But it's no longer that easy. Now companies are looking for different approaches. For example, you know that Amazon makes money from ebooks, not from the Kindle product. Kindle Manager cannot be measured on the profitability of the Kindle device. And ideally, people are looking for a combination of both complements as well as network effects. That's the way they are basically trying to make money out of the kind of innovations they do. So I gave you the example of Gillette. Gillette today has competition from the most unlikely sources. For example, there is a startup, which is no longer a startup. It was bought by Unilever, a company called Dollar Shave Club. So they have gone to a completely new approach to providing shaving solutions. What they do is using a digital platform, they understand your shaving habits, shaving needs, and they craft a particular set of shaving equipment, including the razor, blade, aftershave, shaving cream, all of that. And then based on your usage pattern, they ensure that just when your previous kit is getting over, the next one arrives. So this is a completely customer-oriented, data-based digital way of meeting your shaving needs. And Gillette is no longer focused on IP or on coming up with the next best razor. It is coming up with a shaving solution which is designed and aligned with the customer. And this company is doing very well. It was acquired by Unilever for $1 billion. Okay, let me come to the last point. The last point is that traditionally we thought of the leader's role as filling up the gap. For example, when there was not enough data and somebody had to take a call, for example, whether to launch a new product, we relied on the intuition of the leader to back a particular hunch or to practice intuition to take that decision. But increasingly in the digital era, that's not the way people are working. What people are doing is they are doing experiments to identify whether a particular course of action is the best action or not. Just like I told you earlier, they are doing that either the convergent type or divergent type. So what is the role of the leader today? The role of the leader is to, at 2 levels, is to pilot strategic experiments. You remember I gave you an example of Ford, who is collaborating with companies across industries to find new business models which are cutting across different industry verticals. So you as the CEO or you as the owner have to be at the forefront of building those alliances. And you have to get your team members, you get your employees to do more structured experiments to decide, for example, whether a particular feature should be added or not, a particular product should be added or not, etc. So your job becomes the orchestrator of experiments. You are no longer the one who is just taking decisions or practicing intuition. So basically, these are the 8 different ways in which digital is changing the way innovation is done or changing the scope of innovation. So when all of you are looking at growth opportunities, when you're looking at how you can drive business both during the pandemic and after, you might like to think of some of these methods for driving your business forward. So let me stop here. Thank you. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krishnan sir.